All right, my name is Gary Rutkowski. Today is March 7th, 2008, and today I'll be interviewing Will Mackenzie for the Archive of American Television in Sherman Oaks, California.
It's nice doing it in your home. I think you feel comfortable. I don't sit this way in my home.
Oh, okay. All right, well, we're ready to begin.
Right.
The first question we ask all of our interviewees is, what was your full name at birth?
My full name at birth was William McAllister Mackenzie Jr. It's a long name for... I was 10 pounds, though, so that's why. They call me Big Mac in the hospital. But, second-generation Scot. My grandfather was born outside of Glasgow. And then I think I was in the third grade, and I decided to become Will Mackenzie. My dad was Bill. He was William McAllister Mackenzie. So he was Bill, and so I decided to become Will. And I charged everybody a quarter who didn't call me Will, because I was Billy for a while, and my dad called me Willem for a while, or William when they were mad at me, but Will.
And have you been battling with the lowercase k?
Oh, man. Last name? Yeah, sure. Did I tell you about that, too? Yeah. And my dad always said, you're going to spend the rest of your life having people spell your name correctly. Because my grandfather, I think, came over, and I think it was a capital K. And he didn't want people to know that he was an immigrant Scotsman. So we're going to do a small K. Like, that's going to make a difference. But he said, tell everybody it's a small K, all one word, like Rutkowski. Mm-hmm. And you go, okay, tell them their name, like Karen Ziemba. It's all one word. So that's how it became Will Mackenzie. But we still have that trouble, and it's in the IMDb, sometimes known as Will Mac K, and then sometimes it's MC, capital K, but anyway.
So did you ever have a stage name of any kind? Or were you
Yes, I had a stage name of Bruce McAllister, because I didn't want to join Actors Equity. I was 15 years old, and I was doing summer theater. I got a summer theater job as an apprentice. And I got the lead in The Winslow Boy, which was a Terence Rattigan play, and I played the Winslow Boy, who was 14, and I didn't want to join Equity. And so I decided to become Bruce McAllister. I don't know where McAllister was my middle name, but I don't know where the Bruce came from. So that was one summer of 1954. Yeah.
That was it, the last time you used it?
That was the only time, no. And then I was Will Mackenzie the rest of it.
And where and when were you born?
I was born in Providence, Rhode Island, and I was born on July the 24th, Leo, 1938. I'll be 70 years old this summer, and yeah.
And did you grow up in Providence?
I did. Grow up in Providence, yeah. I was born there. I grew up there. I got into theater there. I got an interest in theater when I was not an athlete. I was a very gawky kid with thick glasses and huge ears, and not athletic. And I got into puppets. I got into marionettes when I was about 10 or 11 years old, and then I started acting.
And what, in terms of when television was coming in, when was the first time you saw television?
At my grandmother's apartment in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And so, anyway, is everything okay? So I don't know, again, how much you want me to get into all of that stuff. But I'd love talking about my grandmother's television, because that's exactly the kind of thing.
Okay, we're back on. Why don't you tell me what you were looking at on television when you were first seeing television?
Test pattern. I was a TV kid, maybe like you. I just was fascinated with television because I'd done puppets. I'd maybe done a little bit of acting. I'm trying to remember. No, I was probably 8 or 7, 8, and we'd go to my grandmother's when she lived in an apartment building in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and she was the first person in the building to have a TV. And of course, it was this teeny little screen in this humongous box. I think it was an RCA Victor, but I remember watching Kukla, Fran, and Ollie because I'd done puppets myself, and here, I would sit in front of that thing. There was a hassock, and I'd be 8 inches away from it, just watching this and fascinated by this whole process. And people from all over the building would come in and watch over my shoulder, just at this phenomenal thing. So this would have been, my dad was in World War II, so let's see, it could have been around 45. I was seven, something like that, 1944, 45. So that's what I first remember. And then Uncle Milty and Milton Berle. I'm trying to remember the other stuff. Howdy Doody. I grew up on Howdy Doody, that kind of thing. So I was hooked.
And what's his name and what did he do?
My dad was William M. Mackenzie. He was a lawyer in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and then became a judge of the Superior Court of Rhode Island for the last 25 years of his career. So he was a judge, and my mother was an English professor at Wheaton College in Norton, Massachusetts. She taught Shakespeare, creative writing, modern poetry.
And what's her name?
Her name was Louise Barr Mackenzie. And they both passed away. My dad lived to 86, and my mom lived to 91, and she died about 10 years ago. And so I had these two overachieving parents, and I'm an only child, you see, so there's your problem right there.
What traits do you think you inherited from them?
Traits? Mm-hmm. I think my dad was, I think I inherited from my dad a determination, a drive. My dad's father was in the Depression and was a very successful textile manufacturer in Scotland and came here and lost everything. So he was my father was a very self-made individual who got through school because his mother really, really forced him to go through school, got him a scholarship to Brown University. They borrowed money from friends and relatives, and he got through Harvard Law School on a scholarship and became a lawyer, and did beautifully. And my mother, I think I got the creative stuff from my mom, who was apparently a wonderful teacher. And this is I was born in 1938. This is when women were really staying at home and taking care of the babies and cleaning up the kitchen. And I had a nanny, and she went off to teach, but they were always there at supper. And I think they were also unbelievably encouraging to I was little Billy at the time, let little Billy find his niche. My dad would love to have had me be a lawyer, I know that. But as soon as it started happening, I was getting fairly successful in high school, acting in plays, and then I went to Brown and got in more plays. And the more he sort of backed off on why don't you become a lawyer and give it a shot, give acting a shot. So
in terms of the puppeteering, were you creating your own puppets?
Yes. Well, no, we bought, it was marionettes actually, marionettes. And we made a few of them, but we'd buy them, and then we'd pile we made the stage out of orange crates, and the school I went to got so excited about them that they would have me and my buddies, I had two friends, do history skits for the schools. And I went to a boys' prep school. It's now co-ed. But I was getting paid at like 10, 11 years old to come and do the signing of the Magna Carta. Do a skit on and have 4 or 5 puppets doing the Declaration, and we'd write the dialogue, and we made the theater out of orange crates, and we'd pile it all into the back of my mother's station wagon. And then other schools in the Rhode Island area hired us too. They heard about it, and we had an article in the Providence Journal on it and stuff. So that got the ball rolling.
And you said you were acting in high school as well. You were.
I did.
In theater?
I got jealous of the puppets. I'd say, they're getting all the glory. I want to do it myself. So I tried out for a play, and it was an original one act. And the headmaster's wife was the director of the play, a very eccentric lady, and she hired me to play a dope fiend in a Sherlock Holmes play. And I had no idea, I wasn't even a freshman. I guess I was maybe 12, and I didn't know, but I shook, I just figured dope fiends shake, so I just was going this, and he was Cockney too, so I did my Cockney accent and everything. And they bought it, and, it was getting out of Will Mackenzie and hiding inside of a shell of something else. And I realized, oh boy. So the next spring she cast me in the lead in the Iolanthe, the Gilbert and Sullivan show. So I was on my way, and I got a girlfriend out of it, and that was the most exciting things, that this really cute girl was suddenly my girlfriend for 3 or 4 years in high school. And I was a geek. I mean, I'll tell you, my daughter loves to show this picture of me and my parents on the steps of our house with the big ears, the glasses, all of this stuff. And but I was starting to find where the hell I was going to go.
So when you went to college, you majored in theater?
I did.
Arts?
Oh, well, there wasn't a theater major. I went to Brown University, and there really wasn't. There is now, but there wasn't a theater major. But there was an incredible extracurricular. And we had a couple of wonderful professors there. And you'd barely get through your academic life because the real life started at 7 o'clock at night at Fonts House Theater. And I was in every play that I could possibly get into. The first play was As You Like It, was Shakespeare, that I played William the Fool, and then I did the lead in Finian's Rainbow because I could sing and dance and stuff. And so suddenly I was into the theater crowd in the freshman year. And Alfred Urey was in there. He was a couple of years, but he became a very, very dear friend, and met his wife in the theater department. And since then, quite a few good actors have come out of Brown. But at that time, there was no major. It's just a wonderful, wonderful university.
And did you take singing lessons or dance lessons or anything like that? Or?
No, but we had a choreographer who would teach you. But no, I never took singing or dancing until I got to New York. And then I started taking beginner's jazz. I was in beginner's jazz the entire acting career. I never, ever made it to intermediate jazz. It was just, I'm married to a dancer, and she's a real dancer. And I realized, for me, when I say I'm a dancer, I'm a mover. I move very well for an actor who sang. So, but I took a lot of singing lessons in New York, yes. Yeah.
So after school, you immediately went to New York? Was that the plan?
No, I had a Fulbright. I got a Fulbright scholarship at the end of Brown University, which was phenomenal. I thought, geez, I'm not that good enough student. And my friend who'd had one said, you have to be a decent student, but you don't have to be a straight A. It's not a Rhodes Scholar. It's a Fulbright. And you have to be passionate about something and be a good ambassador of the United States. It was Senator Fulbright's way of paying back the debt that was owed to us. So I applied, and I got this Fulbright. It was unbelievable. So I spent a year in England at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, and it was just a fantastic year where I couldn't work, so I had to study. And I learned their way of acting and fencing and dancing and singing and voice and diction, and I had these fabulous teachers. I was in a class for what they call English-speaking foreigners. So we had various people, but not just from the United States, Canada, but Switzerland and Norway. They all had to speak English, that's all. So many Israeli, they had accents, but nobody spoke like an Englishman in the end. So that was a fantastic year.
And how do you think your acting style changed from?
I think I learned a lot of technique over there. That was the thing, that I learned a technique. I had the head of the academy was this very proper, pretty effeminate, but very proper Englishman who taught restoration. He was born teaching restoration comedy. And his favorite sayings when you were doing a comedy were, "I need more sex, pace, and gaiety." And I still use sex, pace, and gaiety when I'm directing sitcoms now. The Reba McEntire group just got so sick of hearing SPG, SPG, because to me, successful comedy is sex, pace, and gaiety. And, it's just moving it along and being attractive and being likable and getting the pace and doing all of this stuff. And suddenly taking all of this stuff I learned from him and Sanford Meisner. When I got back to New York, I studied for 2 years with Sanford Meisner. And a lot of the stuff I learned from him, I ended up using more as a director than I ever did as an actor.
And was this the time of the actor's studio techniques?
No, well, I probably was, but Sandy was at the neighborhood playhouse, and he taught some professional classes. You didn't have to go to the neighborhood playhouse. You could. I was in a couple of Broadway shows at the time, but he taught classes on Tuesday and Friday afternoons, and so you could still do your show at night and study with him, and it was fantastic. All the stuff that I got from him, I still to this day use as a director. Yeah.
And I know you appeared in Hello, Dolly. Up
did.
till that point, what kind of shows were you in?
I'd come to New York in the end of '61. I got into the Fantastics, played the boy in the Fantastics, which was like my first really acting equity job. And now I'm about to direct I Do down at La Mirada Theater. And so I feel like this is Tom Jones and Harvey Schmidt, who are friends of mine, who wrote the Fantastics and I Do, and my first job and probably my last job is going to be Jones and Schmidt. So that was the first. I did Half a Sixpence on Broadway with Tommy Steele. I did a couple of revivals at the City Center, Brigadoon and Wonderful Town. And then I got into Hello, Dolly. I was in Half a Sixpence, and Gower Champion saw me in Half a Sixpence. And I replaced Charles Nelson Riley, who played the young male lead, Cornelius Hackle. And I was in Hello, Dolly with Carol Channing, Ginger Rogers, Betty Grable, and Martha Ray. They all came in as the Dollies. And I stayed in it 2.5 years. I mean, it was a fantastic job. I did that show 941 performances. It's just, I don't know how. I nearly had a breakdown, I'll tell you. It's just, but I have a friend now who's been in Phantom of the Opera for 17 years. It's amazing. But he's put 3 kids through college, and it's.
Is there something that you learned from doing a show over and over and over?
Technique. It's all back to technique. I think a lot of the kids today don't do that kind of thing. But you learn how to perform when you feel terrible. Your mother or grandmother could have passed away, and you have to go on. It's you see this with these basketball players, the athletes, or anything. To be able to perform when your voice isn't in great shape, or you didn't sleep the night before, or something like that, and you can still get through it. And so often now, I have a hangnail, I can't possibly perform. The baggage that you suddenly get.
Now,
so.
Did you get much interaction with those women who played the lead in Hello, Dolly?
Oh yeah.
Have a favorite story?
I love them all, but Carol especially, because she had. I had actually opened with Ginger Rogers, who was a dear. Patsy and I got married during the run, early in the run, and she gave us this wonderful cake knife. And Gower Champion came back because Ginger Rogers was opening in it, so it was a big deal, this movie star. So I went in, and a lady named Pat Finley went in for Eileen Brennan. So we got a lot of rehearsal, and that was nice. So we became friendly. We'd go out to lunch during that time, and she just was a sweetheart. And then after I'd been in it a few months, Carol was out on the road, Carol Channing, and Cornelius fell off the ramp, broke his hip. They had no replacement, so no understudy at the time. It was brand new, so they flew me. They doubled my salary. I was so excited. I was making $350 a week, and I got $700 to go to San Francisco and play it with Carol Channing. Oh my God, that was such a thrill, because she was made to play that part, and she was so funny. Ginger was a gorgeous dancer and gracious, but Carol was a comic, and so she had the opening all down, and by the time we came out, the audience was in the palm of our hands, and it was just a joy playing with her. And then Betty Grable did it after Ginger, and I'd grown up. I'd gone through puberty on the Wabash Blues, and I'd seen my sister if I could shimmy like my sister Kate about 80 times as a child. And I told her this story, and she said, that was the neatest thing, But she was great, and Martha was wonderful too, Martha Ray. So, and Bibi Osterwald. God, they've all gone, except Carol. But anyway, yeah, so that was a big part of my life. And my wife went into it after I did, actually, because My wife played it with Ethel Merman. She played Ermengarde with Ethel Merman, who, of course, the play was written for the musical was written for Ethel Merman, but she turned it down. So Patsy got to do it with Ethel Merman. Yeah.
And during all of this, when was your start in television in New York, or did you do much?
I did a TV. Geez, I forgot about that. I did a TV show with Jim Henson before Sesame Street, for the Muppets, and I think that was one of the first. I did a thing. It was based on Cinderella. It was called Cinderella. Jill O'Hara, who then got the lead in Promises, Promises, played Cinderella. Mary Louise Wilson was in that, and I played Prince Charming. And there were 4 humans, and the rest were these Muppets that nobody really ever heard of. Kermit the Frog had been on Jimmy Dean, and the Jimmy Dean Show, and otherwise they were these creatures. And it just was fascinating, because I had done marionettes, basically. But here's Muppets, a combination of marionette and puppet, with these men, women riding around on dollies, with their hands up in these things, looking at TV monitors and operating this, and you as an actor talk to the Muppet, and you just felt they were alive. I mean, you'd totally forget that there was a human being under there, and they'd take a break, and you'd see this Muppet just hanging there, and you'd go, "Oh God, the poor thing, but it's a Muppet." But I did another thing, a Burt Bacharach special.
I did want to ask
Sorry,
you,
go ahead.
Did Jim Henson, did he seem like a visionary to you?
Oh, yes. Oh, wonderful. Frank Oz, who's become a huge movie director. Frank Oz and Jimmy Jewell and all of these people, they were so friendly. And Jim Henson was definitely a visionary. And then my daughter grew up on Sesame Street, came in whenever, I think Jenny was 5, so it was like 67 or so, 68. She was born in 62. So anyway, yeah.
And this show that you did with Jim Henson, it was just a one-shot?
Yes, just a one-shot. It was a pilot for a series that never went. It was a pilot for a series, and and it was, I'm pretty sure it was called Cinderella.
And how did you hear about it?
I got an audition. I was in Hello Dolly at the time. I had to stop, I missed a couple of performances, and I had an agent, and he said that they're this, and theoretically they can shoot around you during the day, but I missed the Wednesday matinee, and I think I filmed late one Friday night, so I had to miss a couple of performances because of that.
And you were mentioning the Burt Bacharach.
And then they had a series called ABC Stage 67, and they did a whole slew of original musicals. And Burt Bacharach and Hal David had written a musical called On the Flip Side with Ricky Nelson and Joni Summers. And I went in and auditioned for that and became Ricky Nelson's manager. And that was joyous. I can't remember who directed it. But again, I was starting to get fascinated with, during Dolly, I had taken my 2-week vacation and gone to New Jersey to direct at this summer theater. And because somebody said, "Oh, I hear you're interested in directing," so I did that, and so I was already starting to get that looking at things from the outside eye, which is a bit of a problem as an actor, because you'll sometimes get out of your character and you're going, "Why is he doing that? Why is the camera over there? Why is this going on?" So anyway, yeah.
And other TV in New York that comes to mind? Were you doing
just lots of commercials. I mean, I told you, I did tons of voiceovers. A guy, I was in Hello Dolly, and I got a knock on my door, and it was Lou Peterson, who was this hero of mine, because he'd gone to my high school, was always 3 years or 4 years ahead of me. So he was the star senior when I was a freshman, and he went to Brown, and he was a senior there, big actor, and now here he was in New York. He was a young advertising exec, and he said, I saw Hello Dolly, and you have a really weird speaking voice. Have you ever done a voiceover? No. So he said, well, come down tomorrow, and we're doing a demo. And I did this demo of the Dow oven cleaner, and the demo went on the air, and it ran for like four years, and that was my first voiceover. And then I did the on-camera commercials. I did a lot of on-camera. I never liked doing it.
Were you being typecast as a certain person?
Yeah, me. Cornelius Hackle. I don't know if you know Hello Dolly. There's two parts I was born to play, and I played them. Chuck Baxter, the Jack Lemmon part in The Apartment, they made into a musical called Promises, Promises that Jerry Orbach played. And I went on the road with my wife playing that. And, I call them...
You should say your wife's name. You haven't said
Patricia Cope Mackenzie. She's from Houston, Texas.
And she's a choreographer?
She's a dancer. She was a dancer. She choreographs for me quite often on television when I like to think I can stage things, but she's so much better at it. And so I'll bring her in, and she taught Michael J. Fox how to jitterbug, or sort of jitterbug, and, Gabe Kaplan how to tango, and she's done an awful lot of TV for me. And then we'll do plays together, musicals together, and she'll choreograph for me there. And then she became a librarian after, when she wasn't dancing anymore. She became a librarian and then got on the board of directors for the school that she was a librarian for. So she just recently retired from that. Yeah.
All right. We were talking about some of the commercials you did on camera. You said
I can't remember what I did on camera. The voiceovers. The one that ran the longest was this 4-way nasal spray. It's a microphone talking to a nose with a mitten on it, and the microphone says, "Pardon me, nose, is that a mitten you're wearing?" And I'm the microphone. I'm the nose. It's a nose mitten. I'm wearing it because I got a bad cold. He says, "Well, if sniffles are keeping you down, try 4-way nasal spray." "Oh, is it better than a mitten?" Whoosh. Hey, that's a blast, but I do miss my mitten. And it was just an extension of me. But this ran, and then suddenly I'm playing the beavers and the chipmunks and all these animated little creatures, and it was fabulous. The Avis rent-a-cars and Bulliva Watch, and I'm trying to remember. And this was all in the 60s and early 70s, before we moved to California. And voiceovers were very big. I did them out here, but the market out here wasn't nearly what it was in New York.
So how did you come to make the transition? Why did you decide to move to Los Angeles?
Most of my friends were coming out here. I could see the business was drying up. I really wanted to act and direct. If I, probably had my druthers, I'd be Hal Prince or something like that. Directing musicals was always and still is the most delicious, satisfying thing, and I love musical theater. We had toured in these Promises, Promises and The Apple Tree, and my wife was in both of those. And we played out here, and I'd gotten some feedback as an actor. And I'd been on a rota. I got on a rota as an actor, and one of my favorite directors, Robert Moore, who's passed away, was directing Rhoda, and he had directed the tour of Promises, Promises. He did it on Broadway, and he got me on a rota, and they got interested in me for the Bob Newhart show. So I got a call when I was in New York from the casting director saying, if you can get yourself out here, they're casting a recurring role that you're perfect for, to play Marcia Wallace's husband, boyfriend who will become husband, on the Bob Newhart show. And she was, Bob's secretary playing Carol. So, of course, I flew out and I got the job. So my wife we had one son and was pregnant with a second one, so I found a rental house and flew them out. And luckily it all worked out. And I did, 8 or 10 episodes as Larry Bondurant on the Bob Newhart show. But this all happened because the girl who had been, it's 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. The lady who had been in Hello Dolly with me, I had directed in summer theater in a couple of shows. She was now on the Bob Newhart show playing Bob's sister, which was also a recurring role. She was playing the girlfriend of Bill Daly, the pilot, and all of that. So he said, she went to Grant Tinker, who was the head of MTM at the time, and said, this guy that you just hired to play Marcia's husband is a really good stage director, and he directed me in some Summit stock, and I think you should look into him as a TV director. So I go, I get this call from Grant Tinker, the head of MTM. Grant would like to see you in his office. I go, oh, Jesus, I'm being fired. I knew, it's actor paranoia. I'm out of here. So I get the, I go up to Grant's office, and right away he says, "I hear you direct." I go, "Yeah." "Are you interested in directing TV?" "Oh, yeah." And, it's like, God, it was like being handed to me on a silver platter. Whereas all my buddies who wanted to, everybody's knocking on doors and struggling, and Grant's saying, "Would you like to?" So he puts me in this program with this wonderful editor. He's gone, but big fat man, Pam Blumenthal, man. And I went into the editing room for about 6 months, and it was 35 millimeter film, no zooms, everything's on dollies, but no all prime lenses, 25 millimeter lenses on the side, and 90 millimeter lenses on the two side cameras, 25. This is 3-camera film, and that was the best thing, is that I learned to walk before I could run. You're basically learning 3-camera primal comedy, which is what the Bob Newhart show was in those days.
So they started you in post?
Oh, yeah. I was on camera in several shows,
right.
But the ones that I wasn't on, I'd come and observe. I'd watch Jimmy Burrows and Alan Rafkin and who else? Mike Zinberg was the line producer, but he was directing quite a few himself. Jay Sandrich was great, and Peter Bonners, God bless him. He was an actor on the show, and he directed a lot. And Bob liked him because he was relating to the actors, and he was so helpful to me. They all were. All 4 or 5 of those guys were.
Was there a style at MTM that they were teaching you? Was there...
I don't know. I just think in those days they did the best comedies. They did phenomenal. Mary Tyler Moore, and they branched off, and then they had a Betty White show, and they had another show that I did called We've Got Each Other. They weren't as successful, but they... Yeah, I think so. I think mainly because of Grant. I'm sure Gary Goldberg talked to you about that, but Grant Tinker was the nicest, easiest going guy in the world, who hired what he felt was talented writer-producers, actors, groups, and let them go. Let them do their thing. You trust them? It's like you get a plumber. You're not going to go in and say, "You be sure to put this," whatever. He trusted his creative teams, and that's why I think there was this wonderful camaraderie of, we're going to work and we are respected for our work. So as far as comedy goes, I would say it's realistic. It's realistic comedy. And that's what I still try to do, is I call it a heightened reality. It's sex, space, and gaiety, but it's also about something. It always comes back to, what's happening to Mary Tyler Moore. We have to care about that person. And I think it's true of any really good comedy now, and the comedy that runs. But when it gets to be phony and artificial, audiences aren't going to come back.
So you directed one episode of the Bob Newhart
I directed one episode, and it was just a fluke. I'd been observing for 6 months, and I've been directing for 6 months. Observing for 6 months, and it just was really fun. And suddenly, Mike Zinberg, the line producer, said, called me at home. "Would you like to direct next week? Do you think you're ready to direct next week's episode?" It was a Friday. It started on a Monday, and a lady had dropped out at the last minute, and they couldn't get one of their regular directors, and so suddenly they said, "How about Will?" And Bob Newhart said, "Fine, that's okay with me." And so they said, "Do you think you're ready?" And I gulped and said, "Yep, I'll do it." And I wasn't any more ready than my grandmother, But I had, it's the best possible time is when you're on a show. They like you, and people were so friendly. Suzanne Plachette was so great, and Bob and the whole cast were, in there, and then the cinematographer helped you. The camera coordinator was great, and so they're not going to let you fail. They're really going to let you do the best job you possibly can. And so then MTM really was responsible for keeping me busy for the next few years, which is great.
As a director and actor, or?
No, I was still on the Newhart show as an actor. Mm-hmm. And then they had this series called We've Got Each Other, which was a strange sort of hybrid of tape and film, and there was no booth, but they were doing, I think it was tape on film Dollies or something like that. I can't remember now what it was. But I directed a whole bunch of those, which was really great. And it was, again, going back to Bob Newhart. I mean, and Grant Tinker being so.
So did you see that now you were going to make the change and you were kind of abandoning your acting career?
Yeah.
And how did you go about getting jobs in the early years in directing TV?
I didn't. I mean, it was really hard. But Grant got me the agent that I have today, Elliot Webb, 33 years ago. And he was at ICM then, and he's back at ICM now. But I met him, and I met a couple others, and I just liked him very much. And but I had this one episode to go on, and he was banging on doors and stuff. And I'd get an episode of this and an episode of that, but nothing with any regularity to it. And it wasn't until, I'm trying to remember, I did a series with David Huddleston called His Honor, and they let me do 3 episodes in a row. And that was the first time when I think I was supposed to do 3 episodes and a couple of things, and I was let go right off. Because when it wasn't the Newhart show where everybody goes, here, we're going to take care of Will, I did something for Norman Lear, and that's where I met Jack Shea. I spent 6 weeks observing on the Jeffersons, and they hired me to do a series, and they said, we'll probably hire you for 3, we're only hiring you for 1, but if it works out, we'll let you do the next 2. I did 1, but I didn't really know what I was doing in those
Did
days.
you ever do Jeffersons?
Never did the Jeffersons, no. But I observed a lot of the Jeffersons. It was great.
And even in those days in television, there weren't that many directors who stayed on a show for many years, were there? There was a lot of rotation.
There was a rotation. I mean, I noticed on the Newhart show there was a rotation of 5 or 6. But on Mary Tyler Moore, Jay Sanders did almost all of those. I think Jimmy Burrows came in near the end and did a couple because he'd been observing on that too. But on Newhart, no, we had 4 or 5 different ones, and and for me, I didn't get on a show for a long period of time. I think it was WKRP in Cincinnati. I think was the first one that I started doing on a fairly regular basis.
Now, going back to Bob Newhart for a
Yes.
minute, can you say another word about kind of being on that show and working with Marsha Wallace?
I loved it. I knew Marcia in New York as an actress, and she was large at that time. I dated her roommate, and I was in between marriages actually, and I'd gone up and was dating this lady. I knew Marcia as an actress in New York, and then suddenly I'm playing opposite her, and she was absolutely wonderful. And Bob Newhart, to this day, I owe most of my career for him saying, we'd be happy to have Will direct this episode, because when you've directed one show and it's a show nobody's heard of, it's really hard. But if you've directed a Bob Newhart show, that's something that was at that time and still is an icon, and he was too. So he was wonderfully friendly. He didn't want much direction at all, but he never minded if Suzanne Plachette had studied with Sandy Meisner, knew Sandy Meisner very well, so I'd get into these discussions with him or with Peter Bonners or some of the others, and Bob would just go sit down. He'd sit down, read his Variety or Hollywood Reporter, and drink his Pepsi, but I ended up directing that second Newhart, the whole first 2 years of the Vermont Newhart, with Mary Fran, and it was the same thing. If you want to talk about this and the backstory of who Mary Fran's character is, or where Tom Poston came from, or who Larry, Darryl, and Daryl are, talk about it, but I don't want to be a part of it. He just wanted to do Bob, and I always respect that. I mean, that's part of good directing to me, is finding out what do they want. Do you want my help? You don't want my help. If you don't want it, you don't need it, that's absolutely fine with me. I mean, he had that thing going. We used to have a joke that I would pay him $1 to come out from behind the desk there, in the Vermont thing, because he'd be able to have his lines back there, and kind of put it there. But now, Bob, I think it'd be good if you went out to the. No, I'm fine back here. Will just let me just stay behind the desk. But this is a good move for you, so and so and so and so. And so out come $1. He'd go and sit down on the couch or something like that. But he's a sweetheart, and I'm very grateful to him.
Now, you had just mentioned WKRP as sort of the first show that you did a number of episodes.
I'm trying to think. There's probably others that have been before that, but that's the first.
Now, was
well-known
WKRP a hit when you started on it?
No. But it was so different. It was so sort of crazy people. Centered around Gary Sandy, but all these nuts. It was another version of the Mary Tyler Moore Show, I think, but much crazier. Like, I didn't do the pilot, but Howard Hesseman was just a guest in the pilot. But when he changed the format of that radio station to the rock and roll, the audience went crazy, and he was this first, this breakout character, the whatever they want to call it, what Michael Fox was on Family Ties, or whomever is that person you kind of least suspect, but bam, the public just adore. So they signed Howard, and then Howard and Lonnie Anderson kind of became the breakout characters on that. But that was another wonderful show created by Hugh Wilson, who I learned a tremendous amount about comedy timing, and we'd read a script on a Monday, and it would be sometimes god-awful, and he'd go back with his writers, but then apparently he would kick everybody out, and he would go into the office until 4 or 5 in the morning and rewrite the script, and the next day, a Tuesday, you'd sit down and read this brilliant, funny, hysterical script, and again, good actors who all loved each other, and so it was a wonderfully pleasant experience.
And what was the sort of approach to comedy on that show?
It was anything goes, I mean, that again is, you have to believe what you're doing. As long as those characters believe in what they're doing, it's all grounded in reality. But I didn't do the Turkeys Can Fly, but that was probably the funniest or the most famous episode, where Les Nessman thinks that turkeys, and he starts this whole promo in there, and Carlson and Les Nessman are shoving these turkeys outside of and you never saw that, but there's just the image of these turkeys splatting to the ground. But these two men totally believed that this was a great promotion. So the audience believes it. I can go to any series that I've done that's successful, and if that character, it's meaningful to that character, and you believe in that character, you're going to buy it. So I can't remember the specific episodes, but I did an awful lot of them over those. It was kind of off and on for 4 years. I did a play at the Melrose Theater, Butley, which is an old. Simon Gray wrote it, and it was a dark comedy, very dark comedy. And Hugh and a couple other producers came to see it. This is after the Newhart show, and they liked the work. They liked what I'd done on stage with this particular play. They liked the pace of it all and stuff, and that's how I got just to do 1 or 2 episodes of KRP. But they were still experimenting with other directors, and so there were 1 or 2 others that did a lot of them too. But there was a nucleus of 2 or 3 of us, and and that was always a very pleasant experience. And as I told you, I bought Lonnie Anderson's house from her 21 years ago. So, and that's where we are. Yeah.
So then you were saying that you were on the early years of the Newhart show, the Vermont show.
Directing it, yeah.
And I know there was some cast changes during your editions with Peter Scolari and Julia Duffy. Can you talk a little bit about the genesis of the...
That was Steve Campman, whom I'd done a pilot with, who was a writer from Canada, and Jennifer Holmes, and sweet lady, and it just wasn't working out. I can't give specific reasons, or don't want to, but it just the chemistry wasn't right, and all of that. And then Peter came in as a guest, and I directed Peter. Was this before? No, I'm so confused with. But I directed Bosom Buddies, and that I think was before.
Yeah, I think
that was 80.
Predated, yeah.
That was 1980. So I knew Peter very well because I directed the first couple of years of Bosom Buddies with Tom Hanks and Peter, and a whole nother wonderful group of people. And so Peter came in as a guest and played sort of a talk show host or something like that. I remember, and Jennifer Julia Duffy was on that too as their maid, and that was a kind of a one-shot deal. And man, they just were gold together, and they're still very, very close friends, which is nice. And so then Steve and Jennifer were let go, and that was the end of that. But
do you
clock? Wait, it's gonna do one more.
Okay, we're back on. We were talking. I was asking you a little bit about Newhart, and I was asking about post-production. How much involvement you get in the post-production of a show?
I get quite a bit. I think for most directors, especially if it's a pilot. If it's a pilot, I will stay with them as long as they want me to stay. A lot of times they'd like you to do your first cut and get the heck out of there. But if I'm allowed to stay through the mix, the very end, I will. But I will always deliver my director's cut. I want certain takes. I want the pace of it is so important to me, and all of that. And most of the producers that I work for in a pilot respect you enough to really pretty much use your cut as a template. And they'll get their studio and other notes and things like that. But I do. When it's a weekly series and I am the sort of resident director, there isn't time to go into the editing room unless it's something very special. But I get the cuts sent to my house, and I'll look at them, and I will get a script and mark all of the notes that I have. But I try to, if I know the editor, which I usually do, after we've done a few episodes, we get a sort of shorthand as to he knows what I'm looking for, so he'll just automatically pace it up as much as possible, or he'll take the most realistic. I mean, you want it to be funny, but you also don't want it to be overboard. And it depends on, some actors do great in the afternoon. When we used to tape in the afternoon, we'd tape without an audience in the afternoon, block and tape. And then we'd shoot with an audience. And sometimes the energy would come way up when there's an audience there. And some actors are great, Michael J. Fox, in front of an audience. And some actors are better, more honest, and don't get so nervous when you let them tape in the afternoon, when it's just a friendly group of writers that are there laughing at some of their own jokes and things like that. But so it all depends.
So you would cut these and have a laugh track to cover for the...
We'd take the laugh from the evening.
Right, yeah.
Take the laugh from the evening and put it in. But sometimes you just get a better performance in the afternoon because they're more relaxed. It just depends on the actor. Everybody, it's human nature. When you get 200 people sitting there in bleachers that are told to laugh and that have a warm-up man going at you, they will laugh. And depending on who the character is and how well they know the character and how famous the show is, when they come in, some people get... some actors, Carol O'Connor, I acted with him in one episode of All in the Family, and I directed him in that one Archie Bunker's place. Jesus, Carol O'Connor, Brad Garrett on Raymond, I mean, they just look, and, Ted Knight, Mary Tyler Moore, Bob Newhart, you can go down the list of, they react, and audiences love them because they know what they're thinking. They know what's going on. So it's just fun. So yes, I get as involved as possible in the editing.
Okay, I wanted to take a step back in between the two Newhart shows you were directing for Bosom Buddies.
I did.
For
loving that. It was a great
lot
experience.
Of the run, I suppose.
Yeah. The first 2 years, first 2 seasons, I think I replaced somebody. I can't remember who, but it was one of my first experiences in a booth with Shelley Jensen, who's become a director, but he was an AD there and who taught me an awful lot about tape. But that was, again, I was an actor. I was older than they were, but I related to their silliness. Tom Hanks and Peter Scolari had a great chemistry. Wendy Jo Sperber, Donna Dixon. I mean, it was a lovely group of people and a wonderful crew. And this is one of those shows that was just fun to do. The whole premise was pretty absurd to begin with. You know, these boys were living in a girls' hotel and dressing up as women all the time, and nobody ever suspected, hello. But it was Some Like It Hot. I mean, that was that kind of thing. And Chris, oh, dear man, who created it, it just was a fun experience. That's how I joined the Television Arts and Sciences Academy, through Don Van Atta, who was he was the line producer of that. Became a good friend, and I think that's where that all happened. They used to play pranks in that show constantly, and I always go to the bathroom, as you know, and so on that show, I swear to God, Tom Hanks got there was a bathroom right on the ground floor, and during camera blocking one day, a cameraman quietly wheeled camera in right behind me into the toilet. It's on. It's probably on the internet somewhere. I don't know, but just from behind, thank God. But that was typical Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks was. He was destined to stardom for that. And then we got him on Family Ties several times. He played Meredith Baxter's brother on The Lam from the FBI. But Jesus. Well, we'll get into that. But he just one of those actors that you love working with, because you give them a seed of an idea and it just blossoms into this flower of and that to me is the joy when you find actors like that, actresses who respond to you to what you're doing, because it gets back into what is television directing, because you're not a. I talked about this in the DGA interview, but a television director I think of as director with a little d, a feature director or a stage director is a capital D, and you are definitely the boss on the set, but then the exec producer comes down, who is the writer, creator of the show, and it's his responsibility, and you're there maybe just for that week. So, you're going to leave all the responsibility basically to him, because he has to answer to the network and the studio and all of that. But anyway, getting back to Tom Hanks and Peter, that was just genuine fun because their chemistry was so good. The hardest part of that show was keeping them focused and disciplined on Thursday, the camera blocking day, because they'd get tired of, you'd do the scene 3 or 4 times, and in tape there were no stand-ins like there were on film, so they'd have to do their own camera blocking, and oh God, they break each other up, and they break all the cast up, and you'd be there 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon because they were all so funny, and I'm having a good time too, but they're coming at me, we're going into overtime at 6 o'clock, what's going on? And you're on the 3rd scene. Yeah, but Tom was screwing around and doing this and
Now, did you ever have to personally be worried about budget and things like that, or was that more the producer end?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the producer end, but they come down on you. The line producer or the UPM will come down and say, you're running. I mean, the perfect example of that is moonlighting, which I don't know where this comes in the time frame, but if you got a moonlighting done in 13 days, most our shows were done in 7 or 8 days in those days, and I guess they still are. If we'd get a moonlighting done in 13 days, they thought you were doing pretty well, because the scripts were coming very late at the last minute, and Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd had to learn them, had to have some time, and there was friction and all sorts of stuff going on. So I'd done a couple of other hour shows, and man, it was 7 days. This is it, 7 days. And so that's when I'd say budget-wise, you really have to get in that. They don't want you to go into an 8th day or a 9th day, whatever it was, depending on. So that's what I would say. Sometimes you get budget if you'd like a second camera. I find in single camera that a lot of times it doesn't make it go any faster to have a second camera. By the time you spent the time You get the first camera there, and if you want a single and an over shoulder at the same time, well, the camera really wants to be in the same place. That second camera wants to be. So one of those shots you're hurting. If you put the over shoulder in the perfect position, then the single is going to be out here. It's not going to be right with the eye line as good as the over shoulder. So you'll end up using so what's the point of having a second? But a lot of times you would like to have a second camera, or a crane, a jib and jib, any of those things. So that's budget.
You were saying for the you were in the booth for the 3-camera sitcoms. Where are you actually during the show taping? Where are you physically?
Depends. Mm-hmm. You mean in Bosom Buddies or?
Let's say Bosom Buddies.
Bosom Buddies, I'd be in a booth. Mm-hmm. I'd be in a booth, and which is in some ways good and in some ways bad. I love being on the floor because I am an actor's director, I think, as opposed to I am not the visionary that whoever Steven Spielberg would be, or a lot of other. Rod Holcomb, I learned a lot from in TV, and they see things a lot differently, especially as single camera directors. But I like being on the floor, but with Bosom Buddies was a 4-camera show, 4-camera tape show, and you're in the booth calling the show as it goes along. You're cutting a line cut for an audience right there of 200 people, and that's a lot of the ways the laughs come, is knowing when to you snap your fingers and a technical director punches a button and you go from camera 1 to camera 2 to camera 3 to camera 4. And if you cut too soon to somebody's reaction or too late to somebody's reaction, you can screw up a laugh. And you're there for that. So I love that. It was very hard to learn, I must say. And I think it's a very difficult, but it's a talent. And I think you really have to concentrate on that and be able to know when to snap your fingers, because if you do at the wrong time, it won't happen. Nowadays, nobody's in the booth anymore, and everybody's on the floor, which I like because then you're able to talk to an actor one-on-one. When you're in the booth, you either talk over the essay and everybody in the world hears, you have no idea what you're doing with your character. You're really, you can't say things like that. So you have to get out of the booth, go down the steps, come out of the truck, wherever you are, and pull that actor aside and talk to them. But I miss those days that you're in the booth. A lot of directors felt you're not giving the actor as much attention because you are removed and you're so worried about the cameras. I think you have to split your focus and not worry that the cameras aren't perfect, but that, and then you have an assistant director right beside you, and you have a technical director beside him or her. So you have plenty of people. Once you've lined up your shots, I try to go back to the acting. That's when I watch television. I'm not as aware of the cameras as maybe I should be, because that's what I watch. I watch the performance and I listen to the script. That's always to me.
I want to ask about a few of these shows you did.
Yes, please.
And get some experiences. First of all, you did a Taxi episode.
Yeah.
What was the experience like on that?
I did Taxi. I was Jimmy Burrows. The first episode of Taxi that Jimmy Burrows did not direct, and I think it was probably in the 3rd or 4th year of the show, and the show was a humongous hit. I was doing another series for Ed Weinberger and Jim. But I was dying to do something like that, and it was really fun. And so I went in and tried to do it. It was like school's out, the boss isn't here. We've got this new kid, and I couldn't get them to rehearse. I mean, they were all in their trailers and running development deals, and I think it was near the end of the series. And the other interesting, I directed Andy Kaufman in that episode. I never met Andy Kaufman. How is that possible, you say? Andy Kaufman never rehearsed. He came in on the show day. That was his deal. And by this time, it was the fifth episode. Andy Kaufman came in. He went right to his dressing room. He meditated. He had a stand-in all the time who met with him, showed him exactly what he did. He only had one scene, and he stood at the taxi with the open engine, and he was the mechanic, who had Latka. And he was huge at the time. And he came in, and I wasn't allowed to talk to him even. We were late going up because he wasn't finished his meditation. He walked in, he whispered something to the stand-in. This is where you do. And he had a scene with Danny DeVito and the girl who played his...
Mary Lou Henner?
No, the girl who played his wife, who's in Wicked. But...